Hi everyone, I'm Swathi Kiran. I'm a professor in speech and hearing sciences at Sargent College. My work is at the interface of rehabilitation, neuroscience, and computational data analysis. This is sort of a big picture of our work. We study people who've had a stroke, and after they have a stroke in the left hemisphere, we collect a lot of information about the damaged hemisphere as well as the undamaged hemisphere on the right side. We collect extensive data about their language and cognitive behavior and impairment. We've done a lot of work to rehabilitate these patients to improve their language function. And our current work is trying to develop predictive modeling to then decide before the patient walks in what are the predictors of optimal response to treatment, and before the patient starts treatment, whether we could tell them how much they might improve as a function of the intervention. So I'm going to give you two examples of what we're doing in our lab. In a project that we just finished collecting data on, we had patients go through a fairly extensive neuroimaging battery where we collected structural information, DTI, resting state fMRI, task-based fMRI, so lots of measures of what's happening in the brain, as well as language and cognitive measures. And work that we're doing with Margaret Bedke, we developed a random forest model to see whether these factors could tell us which are the most important pieces that can tell us whether a patient would respond to the kind of rehabilitation we provide or not. And so in preliminary work, we just finished looking at this data. What we're seeing is that it turns out in the left hemisphere, undamaged parts of the brain, especially domain general parts of the brain, as well as the severity to which a person presents with aphasia are initial predictors of whether somebody is going to respond to treatment or not. So these are all in patients who are English speaking and they've had a stroke. In another set of work that we're doing, we're studying people who are bilingual, who speak more than one language, English and Spanish and so forth. And this is very complicated because you can have n degrees of bilingualism and n kinds of languages somebody speaks. So instead of trying to test 1,000 patients, we decided to build a computational neural network model that essentially shows how people process words and meaning. So that's a semantic map in an English and a Spanish phonetic map. And we trained this model to become like a bilingual person, which was fairly easy to do. But after that, we induced lesions into this model to make it behave like a bilingual aphasic person, so somebody who cannot communicate in one other language. And you can see how we can sort of tweak the lever here and make them severe or less severe. And that was relatively easy to do. And after that, we essentially retrained this model to behave as if it was receiving therapy. And so these are model outcomes of what the computational model thinks the patient should recover after treatment, and we have actual human data. So right now what we're doing is a clinical trial that's funded by NIH to decide whether or not we can actually predict, the model can predict the optimal outcome for the patient even before the patient walks in to our lab. So we collect a lot of information about the patient's bilingualism and how much they're impaired. We give it to the computational model. The modeling folks go through the simulations. They predict what might be the outcome in one language versus the other language, because it can simulate the treatment outcomes a priori, and it tells us what will be the optimal language to train the patient. And then the patient walks in, and we actually train them in that language. And the clinical trial part is actually training them on what the model predicts will be the optimal language, and the control part is treating them in the opposite language, so that we can actually see if the model is getting this information right or wrong. Ultimately, these are data that are helping us get one step closer to precision medicine, because these are the factors that tell us what will actually help our patients improve after therapy versus not. Thank you.